Gosh, an interesting topic, I think, today. Questions to ask your partner about their ex that will actually strengthen your bond. Thank you for joining us again on Second Act TV. Happy that Joni Caldwell Lerner is back for another segment talking dating and relationships after 50. Joni, thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, yes. Thanks for asking.
I have an interesting topic, I think, today is an article I came across, how to ask or questions to ask your partner about their ex that will actually strengthen your bond. Now, before we jump into that, you and I, and as well as with other coaches, we always talk about don't talk about your ex. That doesn't ever go anywhere good. Certainly not on the first or second date. That usually works against you. However, once you don't go down relationship row, it does become necessary and something you should do at some point to understand each other better. But that can get touchy. It can, bring out a whole new can of worms that you really weren't expecting. The feelings that brings out in you. Let me throw it over to you before we get into all the details.
Well, first of all, I'm a very visual person, so all I can see now in my mind's eye is a giant can of worms. But yes, let's clarify. We have talked about not talking about your ex. And what we mean by that, in the past, is don't keep bringing them up. Don't keep throwing them under the bus. Don't keep nagging and saying negative things about your ex, because that just makes you look bad and it brings you into that negative energy. You don't want to bring that to the new relationship. However, I have had that conversation with my guy. I would say, so what happened? But at an appropriate time, not the first date, as you say.
Right. Well, here's some of the questions that they're suggesting and also the warnings that come with it. But the first one, I think you just alluded to, why did the relationship end? And that can be a very revealing answer.
Yes. So why did the relationship end? And listen for, is the person taking accountability for their part? Because it's the person has 100% responsibility and the ex person has 100% responsibility. I know that doesn't add up. That's like 200%. But it's, or you could say 50-50, but it's never all their fault. Never. And if they are saying that, then what's that V word that I always use?
Victim.
Yeah, that's right. So if they're not being accountable and having learned something from the process, then that's a red flag or something interesting to note. Okay, because that's going to be a pattern of one, which means they'll do it again.
Again, yeah. And I guess the good that could come from it is you actually identify things that you want to avoid in your relationship. This is a really interesting question, I thought. How did your ex change how you look at relationships? At first, I didn't even know how would I answer that. And then it came to me, but I'm going to give it over to you first.
Well, it's interesting because if I were to answer that as a person, he first changed how I saw men in the beginning of the relationship because he was a good, integrous, honest man. I did not grow up with that, and I did not attract that because what I was used to is, that we've talked about the bad boys, right? He wasn't that. He was a good, kind man. So much of what went wrong with our relationship had to do with me. I really get that. He's got his part, but it's so not interesting to me at this point. It just isn't. It's because I can't change any of that, and that was what happened. So what was it that I learned?
Yeah, what came up for me is that it really changed my outlook on marriage forever.
As in not ever getting married again?
Not ever getting married again, and that marriage doesn't mean anything, and it's 50% breaks up, everybody screws around. I mean, I was
Jaded.
hurt, I was jaded, and I hadn't thought about that until I said, well, how would I answer that? And it's like, boom.
So for me too, it would be I would never want to get married again because I didn't want to feel trapped, right? But I had trapped myself. within that relationship. It wasn't his fault. And then the other thing was, and I said this to John, I said this to him, my fear is that if I commit to you, this is 5 years ago, if I commit to you, you're going to stop trying. Because that's what happened in my marriage, you know? Yeah. And he said, I will never, ever, for the rest of your life, ever stop trying. And I was like, wow. And the truth is, he's never stopped trying. And me too, to him. It's not, you know, I'm going to sit on my throne and feed me grapes. Not at all. Okay. Yeah. That's not a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is an interesting question. I would invite our viewers to think about that. I don't know if you would have like a revelation sort of like I did, but it's a great question. So that it made me actually really excited about this segment. So hopefully somebody else will have a revealing experience.
Yes. And you know, the important part is looking at what did change. What can I do about it? How can I be different going forward?
Yeah. Well, here's one that leads right into that. What would you do differently if you could do it over again? Other than not being with them, which that's the one that comes right to my mind. I mean, I have the red flags hitting me in the face. Anyway, we've talked about that before.
Whacking over the head.
But what would you do differently?
Right. Okay. So as a question, that's brilliant. That's a brilliant question. What would you do differently? And the person may have not really thought about it. It might be very helpful to them. And they might just go, wow, I've never thought of that. Yeah. I would pay more attention. I would show up more. I would maybe have a part-time job. I mean, there are different things that they could have done, and it's different for everyone. But if they're willing to look, it's really powerful.
Yeah. And obviously that builds into, you know, why did it end? Lots to think about. I can get really, really, really introspective. Now, this one here, that's a toughie. I don't even know if I want to know the answer to it because then my mind would keep going on. But what drew you to them in the first place? Is that a good question to ask or not?
I think it's an interesting question, and you can preface all of these questions and just say, "Hey, just answer." You know, I would love to have this conversation. If it's too uncomfortable, let me know, and you don't have to answer. I'm gonna, you know, but I think they're fascinating questions. Are you game? So my take on that is very different from yours, right? Because I come from a coaching point of view, a metaphysical counseling point of view. We are drawn sometimes with the wounds. Right? We're drawn. Right. We have matching wounds that we've come to heal. So that's why I was drawn to my husband. Yeah. You know, and he was safe and he was secure and he was all the things that made me feel like I'd be okay.
Yeah, and they bring this up though here. It's really, do you want to know, or if you know that, well, this drew them, well, I'm not like that, then you know that it brings out insecurities in you that can actually hurt the relationship. Is one point they made. What do you think about that?
So it's interesting because even if I said, well, he was a doctor and he was very successful and he was very smart and he was all these things. Right. That doesn't take away from the person that's sitting across from me. That's just my truth about that thing happened 35 years ago. Right. Yeah. If the person is insecure and has some reaction.
Obviously, I admit it. I absolutely admit it.
So do you have insecurities? Yeah, okay, sure. You and, I don't know, 7 billion other people. Do you have the insecurities or do they have you? That's the difference. They're not running your life.
Yeah, such a great point. And I think being aware that this is an insecurity is one of the first steps, you know, and that's one of my big things I learned 10 years ago or so. Here's another interesting one that you really have to think about before answering. What kind of scars do you have from your previous relationship? What a deep, my goodness, that can go a lot of places.
You know, you could change the word scars. You could say blind spots. But the scars, I mean, that sounds, it does sound a little brutal. And it implies that they have scars.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You may not have any. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could say, well, you know, do you have anything you need to heal still from your past relationship? Do you think, if this is on the second or third date, you might leave that one out?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll skip ahead on one, but it's kind of the same thing. And what's the difference? What baggage are you still holding on to? I kind of like that better than the scars. But still, what baggage are you holding on to? Would you ask somebody that? Or
You
would
could
you
say,
ask it
do you
differently?
think, do you, looking back, do you think there's any baggage you're still carrying? One of my baggage things was John would say to me, I would really love to hear your opinion on things. And I'm like, you would? You know? Because I had spent so many years just going, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that was my interpretation of it. So I had to learn here's what I had to learn. I had to learn, oh my gosh, he actually finds me interesting. I'm actually an interesting person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a big one. That's a pretty deep one. But that's what came up for me. So
yeah, well, it'll be interesting to hear what comes up for others because we talk a lot about, at this point in our lives, we have so much baggage we bring to, don't bring your baggage. So, but what exactly do we mean by that? Again, if you start thinking about it deeper, it gets really interesting.
Yeah. Well, and so let me just say one thing about that, because I love how you sparked my brain. So, so baggage is anything that you keep remembering or going back to that affects your present day relationships. And a healer once said to me, when you want to move on, when you want to go to the next level, imagine yourself going up to a door. You open the door, you walk through the door. Now you can either look back, keep going back, right? Or leave the door cracked a little bit. Or you can shut the door and say, okay, bring it on. What's new? I know this is unknown to me and it's scary, but what's out there? Otherwise, it's just, why keep repeating the past?
Yeah. Again, harder, easier said than done, I think. Something super important to be aware of. Because again, once you're aware of these things, you can actually change them. And so many people just aren't. They just haven't, been hit over the head with this. That's why I kind of like these questions, even though they can lead down a dangerous road. This one, the very last one here, Joni, I think that can lead to something good or has the potential rather to be good. But how did you know your ex supported you? And it's not how did he support you, but how did you know that you were supported by your ex?
Yeah, very interesting. That might stump more people than the other ones. Yeah. Because we're trained or have trained ourselves to look at the negative.
Yes.
And we had to look at the negative in order to move out of the relationship. Mm-hmm. Oh, and the other thing is how invested are we in being right about him, about it, about them, about whatever. I mean, if you think we're the only species in the world that just, kills ourselves rethinking. Butterfly doesn't go, geez, do you think I landed on the wrong flower? I don't know. Maybe I should go back to the flower and try.
That is so funny.
So the question is, how did they support you? Basically,
yeah. Right? How did you know?
How did you know you were supported? That's a fascinating question.
For me, again, and this is why I thought maybe this can actually help you jump to the positive, is because what struck me was that when I thought about this, that I actually did have some pleasant thoughts, and that was nice. So maybe you do, you can think about it in a more positive way, something that, didn't end well.
Okay, so a better question for me would be, so tell me some of the positive things about your relationship. Because the truth is, there were so many amazing things.
Yeah, this segment really got me thinking, especially in the prep for it. And then again, this perfect topic for Joni. So in letting you end, as I always like to, any questions that you would suggest asking or that could actually help bring or bond your relationship, a new relationship?
I'm a big believer in communication, right? And setting intention and prefacing things. So the truth is, if you both have exes or one or the other, they did influence your life. It's not like you came out of a vacuum. Yeah. So to deny that doesn't work. But to intend to learn something from it, to become closer, to find and then set it up that way and say, hey, listen, would you be willing to have a conversation about our exes? Because I don't want to keep referencing him or go back to, that's not who I am. But I'd love to have this conversation. Are you open to that? I would say, most importantly, honest communication in general about everything is going to bring you closer together and create a foundation. And that's really what you're trying to do there. It's not about throwing anybody under the bus or being negative or nagging or complaining. But how do we learn from this? And that's true about everything in life. Everything
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah.
So,
Well
and
said,
I'll stop
Joni.
talking.
Well said. Well, again, our time goes by so fast, and I always appreciate yours. We'll link to all your information. As I usually say, if anything resonated here with you, and if you feel like you might benefit from talking to somebody like Joni, give her a call. She's wonderful to work with, and I know you'd love to hear from them.
Thank you. And what I do is I offer a 30-minute complimentary call, and
Right.
sometimes that's all they need. Sometimes they want to coach. Completely up to them. But this is my passion. This is what I do. This is like, yay! So if you're interested, my email me. I think she'll put the email in there.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Joni, thank you, and we'll see you again soon on Second Act TV. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right here. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too, and we'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you next time.